I am so excited. I had the pleasure of talking to and interviewing one of my new favorite authors. Her name is Ellery Kane. She writes thrillers, and I had requested one of her books. It is called The Wrong Family. I had requested it on Net Galley a couple weeks back, and I was so excited to read this book. You guys know that I love thrillers, but we just hung up. We just got off the phone and we had such a great discussion. Before I post my full interview with Ellery, I am going to talk very quickly about my thoughts on this book and my review, which were outstanding. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. And like I said, this is one of my new favorite thrillers. Ellery is one of my new favorite authors. It absolutely blew my mind. This book comes out on August 30th. So you guys have a couple more weeks until this comes out. You are going to love it just as much as I did. Overall, I gave The Wrong Family 4 out of 5 stars. The only reason I didn't give it 5 stars is because I thought it started a little slow. Honestly, it picked up super quick and the plot was really good, really well written. I thought that she did such a great job of portraying every single character to have a crazy story. Everyone had secrets. Again, you guys will hear all of this in the interview, which I'm clipping soon. My favorite thing about this book was the characters and the character development. Ellery did such a great job with the plot, and with thrillers, it's hard to be surprised, but I was truthfully surprised by a couple of the storylines here because there are different secrets and different storylines with every single character, but what really blew me away was her character development, the way she wrote the characters, and just her descriptions. I thought I was there. It takes place in Lake Tahoe, and I could see Lake Tahoe. I could taste all of the food at the restaurant they worked at, and I had a really great image of what every character looked like. She just did such a phenomenal job of making every character lovable, but you also want to hate them and you know so much about them, so you want them to succeed. I love the plot. I was so surprised by a couple of the storylines. I thought that the writing was very, very good. I am not a harsh critic. I'm really not, but I never have high expectations for books. And right when I started to get a rhythm of this book, I was hooked. The writing held my attention, and I didn't think it was very repetitive. I didn't think that anything was unnecessary. I just thought that it was a very good story and laid out very perfectly. It was very well written. And again, it was just so descriptive. I absolutely loved it. I just had such a fun time reading it. Now, I also will say, because I was reading it or given this book, because this book was given to me by Net Galley, I was reading it on my phone, which I hate. I hate reading e-copies or digital books. I love a physical book. And so I thought it would take me a while to get into the rhythm of reading consistently on my phone. Once I got into the hang of this book, I could not put it down. It was so easy to read. It was so much fun to read. And you just get to know all of the characters. You have this relationship with all of them, and you don't want to put this book down. So here we go.
I am joined today by one of my new favorite authors. This is Ellery Kane. She is about to release a brand new thriller called The Wrong Family, and I recently read it. I was given this book as an advanced reader copy, and I am so excited that I read it. It is one of my new favorite books. So, Ellery, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to hear that you enjoyed the book.
Oh my gosh, it was so good. And I'm always a little skeptical about ARCs because they're kind of hit or miss on NetGalley. I've read a couple that I just did not want to finish. But I know I have to because you were supposed to be reviewing them. But I was hooked in this book. I loved it so much and I had such a good time reading it. It was really good.
It's music to my ears. Music to my ears.
Yay! I told all my friends in my book club, I was like, "I can't wait for you guys to read this when it comes out." And I have recommended it to all of my coworkers, so I'm really
Awesome.
excited about it.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yay! So, Ellery, tell me a little bit about yourself. I know writing isn't your day-to-day job, so tell me a little bit about that.
That is true. So in my day job, I'm a forensic psychologist. And that basically just means that I do psychology where it intersects with the law. So I have a private practice, and then I also work for the state of California. where I do risk assessments for inmates who are potentially going to be released on parole.
Oh, wow.
So I meet with them, do an interview, do an in-depth look through their file, and give my opinion on whether they pose a risk for violence in the community.
Oh,
And
wow.
then, yeah, it's a pretty interesting job. And then I do some similar types of work in my private practice as well.
Oh my
So you can see
gosh.
that I have plenty of material for thrillers.
That is exactly one of the things I wrote, as you know, was does anything that you see come into your writing? And we'll get into that in a minute, but I don't know how you even have time to write. 16 novels, is it? Or almost 20?
This is 15, and
Okay.
I'm just started working on 16.
Oh my gosh. I don't
So
know how
it's
you
and
have the
it
time.
I don't either, quite honestly. It still surprises me sometimes. Um, I I've sort of worked it out now where I just write 500 words a day. And
Oh
if
my
I
gosh.
sometimes I write a little more, but if I can just get 500, no matter how busy I am, 500 is doable. So
Wow.
if I can stick to that, you'd be surprised how quickly 500 builds up into a novel.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that's incredible. And when I was reading on your website and just researching you, I was like, I don't know how she has time to do this. And can you write multiple stories at once, or do you brainstorm multiple stories while you start to think about them?
Yeah, so what happens, since I've started working with Bookouture, who's the publisher that I have now, they'll
Yeah.
usually have me pitch a couple of ideas, and then they pick and choose from those which ones they like. So this particular round of contracts, we narrowed it down to this idea, The Wrong Family, and then the next idea that I'm working on. And yeah, then from there, I just brainstorm the plot and the characters, and it's almost as much work, if not more work, than my day job. It's just a totally
Oh, I'm
different
sure.
kind of brain activity.
Yeah.
For my day job, I'm doing a lot of analytical writing, a lot of logical writing. But in some ways it's similar because I am telling the story of a person when I'm writing a risk
Hmm.
assessment. I'm really delving into their past and kind of
Wow.
saying how they became the person that they are.
Yeah.
So it's in some ways it's similar, but it does require a little bit different areas of the brain for
Hmm.
sure.
Of
So some
course.
days I'm tired, after I finished writing a report for an inmate, it can be challenging to transition into creative writing
Hmm.
because you need a lot of brain power for creative writing. Is one thing
Oh,
I've
yeah.
learned.
Well, so that brings me back to my question. Do you use any of these stories or people that you meet in real life with your day to day? Are they ever inspiration for your books?
Yeah, for sure. 100%. I
I
think,
love that.
my day job it can be stressful. It can be pretty traumatic. I am
Yeah.
hearing usually about the worst day of someone's life, in
Wow.
particular for the inmates, because many of them have committed murder. So I'm
Wow.
hearing those stories. I'm also hearing about the trauma that they live through.
Of
So
course.
it's a lot. It can add up over time. And so I think for me, writing has really been a great release and a therapy, and a way to sort of channel all of that material that I hear, into a way that I can control it. I can control the
Hmm.
ending. I can make it have a happy ending,
Yeah.
which doesn't always get to happen in real life.
Of
So
course.
definitely, they all make their way somehow into my
Wow.
stories. And actually, my first series, the Doctors of Darkness series, is really heavily inspired by my work as a psychologist.
Oh,
It
okay.
involves all psychologists, main characters, and
Oh,
they
wow.
find themselves in various dark and twisted scenarios.
That is so interesting, and that was the first thing I wanted to know when I was on your website. I was like, "I wonder if she uses these real people into her work." So that is just so interesting, and I love true crime, I love thrillers, so it kind of makes me happy that you take some from real life and like you said, you can make it your own and make it have a happy ending. So I love that.
Exactly, exactly. One of my
Wow.
favorite books, well, what I would say one of my favorite characters that I've ever written, is in the Doctors of Darkness series. The second book, it's called The Hanging Tree,
Mhm.
and it was really just this character was completely inspired by my day job. He's a lifer, which means like a life term inmate who gets out on
Mhm.
parole. And those are pretty much the guys that I talk to day in and day out. So this character was just living in my brain. He was
Oh
just
my
ready to come
gosh.
out, and he was so much fun to write and so easy to write because I
Mhm.
could just hear his voice after talking to so many similar gentlemen. I
Wow.
could just really hear his voice in my head, and I could shape him into whatever I wanted, and
Yeah.
he had a happy ending.
Oh, that's awesome. I can't wait to read more of your books. I don't know if I said it earlier, but this was the first one of your books that I have read, and I am just so thrilled to read more. I can't wait. But talking about some of your other books, so your very first novel, and correct me if I'm wrong, was Legacy.
Yes.
And I know that you have won multiple awards on Legacy. Did you ever think that your very first novel would have such great success?
No, I honestly had no clue what to expect about really the entire process of writing. I was a complete newbie. I should say not writing, but publishing.
Mhm.
Writing I knew about, but publishing is a whole different animal. And I really had no idea what to expect. I had no idea how difficult it would be to reach readers and, even to sell just one book and to get one person to read it and like it.
Yeah.
So no, I was completely shocked and very happily so.
Oh, that is awesome. Do you wanna give me, like, a brief overview of Legacy?
Yeah, so the Legacy series is pretty different than my other books.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a dystopian novel. So it
Oh,
actually came about shortly after I had read Divergent by Veronica Roth.
yep.
I don't know if you've read it, but
I
the
haven't, but
yeah. So the first book, I was just like in love with the characters, and then as you read, I won't spoil anything for anybody if they haven't read it, but the third book does not have a happy ending.
oh my god.
And so at that point, I had always known I wanted to write. And I
Wow.
always knew someday I was going to write a novel. And I just told myself, I can write a dystopian book that has a happier ending than this book.
Yeah.
And I want to do it. And so I actually signed up for a writing course. And
Oh,
I was
okay.
going to kind of get back into creative writing after a long time away from it. I
Awesome.
never made it to the writing course. I just started
No.
writing. Yeah, I just started writing, and it just like that first book came out so quickly. I literally finished it in about 6 weeks. Um, None
Oh
of
my
my other
gosh.
ones have been that fast. I will tell you. But
That
so
is
it's a
crazy.
dystopian book set in San Francisco in 2043. And it does involve psychology. It's all about emotion altering medications and
Oh,
how these medications have changed society for the worse.
wow.
um, yeah, and so it follows the same characters. It's a 3 book series, and it was honestly so much fun to write. Um, and I really loved the characters in that one.
Oh, I love that. I can't wait to read it. That sounds so good. So, do you have any of your novels or series, do you hope to see any of them turn into movies or TV shows in the future if you had to pick
Any and
one?
all, any and
All of
all.
them?
I'll take any
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I try to write in a way that is a little bit cinematic. Like I try when my process is very much thinking of scenes.
Mhm.
And so I would hope that any of them could be adapted to a movie or a series. I think if I had to choose one, it would probably be Daddy Darkest, which is the first one in my Doctors of Darkness series.
Okay.
And that one also just has some really cool characters. There's a serial killer that you kind of love,
Ooh.
a lovable, handsome serial
I'm
killer.
I'm thinking Dexter.
Yes. Yes. And it's set a little bit in a prison, and then also
Okay.
all across the Bay Area. And there's also past and present, which I tend
Oh,
to do
okay.
in a lot of my books. I didn't do that in The Wrong Family, but
Yeah.
I do tend to have that in quite a few of my books, my other books. So I think that one would be great as a movie or even as
Yeah.
a series.
Oh,
But
I
like I
love
said,
that.
I would be happy if any of them
Uh-huh.
were on a big screen or a small screen.
Yeah. Well, like you said about making it very cinematic and descriptive, I was telling one of my book club friends, every scene in The Wrong Family, I felt like I was in Lake Tahoe. I was like, it is so descriptive. When they're in the restaurant, I could like smell the food. It was so descriptive. And I had such a good vision for what the house looked like and what every character looked like. And it was very cinematic. So props to you because I
Awesome.
was like, this would be a phenomenal movie.
Awesome. I would love that. I would love that.
Me too. Well, let's get into The Wrong Family. So I'm going to do a quick little overview from my perspective, and please
Okay.
chime in anything, very quick. So, this book is about Hallie. She lost her mother young and she is on this quest to find her dad. So, she does DNA testing. And I personally find this super interesting because my family is really into genetics and like who your family. So, I found this super exciting. That's actually why I requested it on Net Galley. But so Hallie goes on this quest to find her biological father. She does end up meeting him and he has two other children. He invites Hallie to their family home in Lake Tahoe for a couple weeks. And once she gets to the house, she realizes that her new family is not who she thinks they are. They have a lot of secrets and they are keeping so much from not just her, but also each other. So you get to know every single character and what their secret is, what they're keeping from Hallie. And I won't spoil anything, but at the end of it, everyone's secrets become known, and her family is not who she thinks they are. It was wild. It was so good. I absolutely loved it. So, give me a quick little overview of what inspired you to write this book and just walk me through it.
Yeah. Well, so like you, I've always been fascinated by the whole concept of DNA technology, and I'm really into true crime as well. And
Yeah.
as you know, especially here in recent years, DNA has really figured into solving a lot of cold cases,
Yeah.
and it's really become quite controversial. It's sort of like, where do these companies draw the line in terms of your privacy with your genetic material, and what are they willing to turn over to law enforcement? So I just love
Yeah.
that idea. And I had actually, a few years ago, I submitted my DNA to 23andMe, just because I was
Yep.
curious, to learn more about myself and my family. And I did learn some cool things about myself. I didn't uncover
Oh,
any
awesome.
any crazy family members, but
Any new siblings?
no, right. But I did learn some interesting things about myself. So that was kind of lurking in the background. And then a couple years ago, so I am a big fan of the Hallmark Channel, which may
Yep.
seem pretty ironic since I write thrillers, but
Me
I love
too.
a good happy ending as well. So I do watch, a lot of the Christmas movies on the Hallmark Channel. And a couple of years ago, there was one involving DNA, and it was about a young lady who had matched with her father, so she thought, and she went to visit him over Christmas. And of course, there was a whole romance storyline.
Of
But she
course.
learns, yeah, of course, she learns that the DNA company made a mistake and he's not actually her father.
Oh,
And
no.
so as I was watching, and of course the Hallmark movie ends very happily and
Yeah.
wonderfully. But as I was watching, my thriller writer brain was kind of thinking, if this wasn't a romance and there wasn't a happily ever after here, what might go wrong, or how might she have ended up in this situation, thinking that her DNA was a match for this family when it really wasn't. So all of those ideas came together to give me the wrong family.
Wow, it was so crazy to me, and I can't even begin to imagine where you got all these ideas and how you did make it come together, but it was really great. And like I said earlier, I thought the descriptions in this book were so fantastic. Their family home, I could picture it perfectly, and Lake Tahoe, the restaurant, I just loved it all so much. But my one of my favorite things about this book was how descriptive you made every single character. I feel like in most cases we know a lot about the main character and not so much about everyone else, but you did a great job about writing everybody's story and giving everyone such a good purpose for the plot line. So, do you feel like you pull traits from yourself into any of these characters or maybe even characters in any of your other books?
Mm. I think, writing characters is really my favorite thing. I think though now that I work with Bookouture, they tend to be a lot more plot driven. But
Okay.
I do always try to focus as much as I can on the characters, because I think that's my sweet spot, since
It is.
being a psychologist, you do learn a lot about people,
Yeah.
and you just sort of have these prototypes for people in your head. And for me, characters are really fun to develop and fun to write. And I like to write characters that have a little bit of good and a little bit of bad, to make them
Yep.
more realistic. So I think, Hallie was a really relatable character to write. She's somebody that feels the need to belong. And I think that's something that we can all relate to, certainly something that I relate to. But yeah,
Yeah.
I pull little traits from myself and little traits from people that I've encountered in my job. And I'm kind of
Mhm.
always on the lookout. I tend to eavesdrop a lot.
Oh my god.
I'm a big people watcher.
Yep.
I'm always looking for ways to help myself develop characters in a way that feels real to people.
Yeah, wow, and it's so funny that you say that Bookouture is very plot driven because I do think the reason one of the reasons I love this book so much was because of the characters. Obviously, the plot was amazing, but if the characters weren't written exactly how they were, I don't know, it really meant a lot to me how great the characters were, and like you said, everyone you kind of want to love everyone in this book. There
Mhm.
there were a couple of scenes where Natalie, I was like, "Oh, come on." But at the end of the day, you still want her to do well. Like, you wanted
Mhm.
everyone to succeed, and you really formed a relationship with every single character. So I just
Yeah.
loved it. But
Yeah, I'm a fan of characters as well, the character development. Like I think, you can have the best plot, the most twisty, crazy plot, but if the characters aren't well developed, it's hard to sell those crazy twists. So,
exactly. Exactly. And there are so many twists in this book. There are so many secrets. So almost every character has a crazy secret and I expected a couple of secrets. Hallie, maybe her dad, definitely one of the siblings. I knew one of the siblings was up to no good, but everybody had a secret and I was shocked by a couple of them. Did you have a favorite secret or did you ever like second guess any of the plot lines in the story?
I think I always knew that I wanted all the characters to have a little secret that they were
Yep.
keeping from each other as well.
Mhm.
Just because that feels pretty real to me for most families. There's usually
Yeah.
some drama and tension in
Oh,
most
of course.
families. And I think probably my favorite plot line was Natalie, just because she was so fun to just like you love to hate her.
Yep, you love to hate
um,
her.
yeah.
So speaking of Natalie, I have to ask because I don't know if I got clarity in this, and this is a spoiler alert if you haven't watched this, and does is the book published on August 30th?
August 30th.
Okay, so I'm gonna have this video up well before then, so spoiler alert to anyone watching. Was Natalie actually dealing drugs out of the cookie business? Is that what was happening?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, and then I think I sort of left it a little bit open at the end as to what
Yeah.
exactly happens to her, but I think her dad kind of made it clear that he's gonna be supportive of his kids, sort of no matter what roads they take,
Yep.
but yeah, and I think she probably learned her lesson.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
maybe.
I think her own life would be a great sequel. I don't she was so horrible at some parts, but then I was just like, "Ooh, more Natalie. I love it." So,
Right.
it was great. And did you ever second guess any of the characters or
Hmm. Yeah, I
Mm,
mean, I think in the process of writing any book, you have a lot of second guessing.
yeah.
It's just part of the process, and I do every single time. I have a lot of second guessing
Yeah.
of myself, of the plot, the writing, the characters, the ending.
Mhm.
There's second guessing that goes on throughout, and you just kind of have to have a little bit of faith that it's all going to come together in the end. And for this one, I knew that I wanted all the characters to have something that was a little bit hidden. So
Yeah.
I think it ended up coming together pretty well.
Oh,
But
I loved
you know,
it. I think the ending was perfect. Like I said, I was absolutely shocked and I am a crime junkie by heart, so it takes a lot. My book club gets so annoyed with me because they're like, "How did you predict this?" And I'm like, "This book was very not this book, but other thrillers." I'm like, "I don't know, it just seemed a little predictable." But there were a couple of plot holes in this book that I did not see coming at all, and I was just like like audibly gasped. So,
right,
it
right.
was
I
so
love
much
that.
fun to read.
I love that. And honestly, I will say that for this one, more so than any book I've ever written, I wasn't sure exactly what was going to happen in the end.
Oh,
So I
really?
would like to think that the fact that because I've read some other reviews as well that say they didn't guess the ending. I'm
Yep.
thinking that might have been because I didn't even know the ending for most of the time that I was
Oh, I
writing it.
love that.
So Yeah, it was probably a good thing that I didn't.
I love that. And have you considered writing a sequel to this book or
Hmm.
any of the characters?
Never say never. I would never
Yeah.
say never to a sequel. I think sequels are very challenging, especially with thrillers, because it's hard to get that punch that you got with the first book.
Yep.
And I have written a couple series, so the Legacy series, and then I have also with Bookouture the Rockwell and Decker series.
Mhm.
And I always just find it's really difficult to write series in particular because you have to keep all the characters straight and you've got to have multiple plot lines going. So
Yeah.
those are always really challenging. And similar with sequels, it's hard to match that first emotional punch and surprise that you get with the first book. But
Mhm.
again, I would never
Never
rule
say
it out
never.
entirely.
Well, I personally, it is so hard for me to really dive into a series because I'm a very quick reader and I'm typically a one and done. I read a book and then, I'll scour the internet for other books by the author, but it takes a lot for me to really get into a series. So I typically prefer a standalone book. And I thought that this one could be a standalone. I was like, I think it wrapped up beautifully. And not to talk about other books, have you read The Housemaid by Frida McFadden?
Yes, yes.
So that is a review I just recently did, and it was my first book by her as well. But I said at the end, I said that I didn't think the second one, which I haven't read, was very necessary because it wrapped up really well. And I can't imagine the second one having, like you said, having that punch that the first one did. So
Yeah.
I think that this one is great as a standalone and would be a great movie. So
I agree.
yeah, I really loved it. And it was like I said, it's hard for me to get into some of the Net Galley advanced reader copy books because you go in having really no idea what to expect because there's not a lot of reviews on GoodReads or any other platforms. And so sometimes it takes me a while to get into an advanced reader copy because your friends aren't reading it. You don't really have anyone to talk to. But this one hooked me from the beginning and I absolutely loved it.
I love hearing that. I really do. For an author, it honestly just means so much to look at, reviews and see that people are enjoying it and that people are loving the characters. That's something that I always just makes my heart feel so full and happy when people mention the characters.
Yeah.
And that people were surprised and you were surprised by the ending. That makes me happy too, because it's so hard with, readers reading so much, like I'm assuming like you do, reading so many
Yeah.
thrillers. You kind of, how many different ways can you twist something?
Exactly,
And so
exactly.
it's hard to surprise people.
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled that this one surprised you.
Yeah, me too, me too. Well, so another thing that I typically like to do with book reviews, and I didn't give you a warning on this, is book club questions.
Okay.
And I didn't read past the end of this book. Have you thought of any book club questions for this book? Or
Hmm.
I have thought of a couple, and I definitely want to ask you one of them.
Okay, go
But
ahead.
yeah, so it is, and it's not serious whatsoever. It's the more fun book club question. It was in the contest at the restaurant when they have to create this dish in 15 minutes. Do you have a dish that you would make for the contest?
That's such a great question. Okay, so I will confess I am not a cook.
Okay.
And that's so funny because I wrote a book about, obviously there's a lot about cooking in this book.
And very good
um,
details.
Yeah, and there were some things I will say that my editor was like, "Are you sure that this would, if you added the oil here, that it would be brown?" And I'm thinking to myself, no, I'm not sure. I
Like,
honestly
I
have
don't
no
know.
idea. Yeah, I have no idea. So no, there's nothing that I would prepare, but I would be happy to eat any of the dishes that were featured in the book.
Me too. That's one of my favorite things that my book club does is with meals and stuff. We just recently read Mad Honey by Jodi Picoult, and there
Mhm.
it ends with so many recipes. And I think all of us wrote down a couple and we were like, let's all make these and try it. So I love that. And I think this would be a really great book club book. Once it's released, I want everyone to read it and do it for their book club book. I have thought of a couple questions, but yeah, I look forward to if you have any more if you have any book club questions that you think of, in the future, definitely let me know because I think it would be the perfect book club book. There's so much room for discussion.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely agree with all the family things and the DNA aspect.
Mhm.
I think there's a lot there for discussion for sure.
Oh, yeah. So this was my first book by you. What would you recommend I read next?
So I would say to start with the Doctors of Darkness series.
Yep.
And that series is unique because since you don't necessarily gravitate toward series that have the same characters, this is really a series that's just tied together by a theme, which is that all the characters are doctors
Okay.
in dark situations. But
Okay.
each book has totally different characters and totally different situations.
Oh,
So
I love that.
I would start with Daddy Darkest, which is book one in Doctors of Darkness, and then kind of make your way through that series. And then I have a couple other standalones with Bookouture as well.
Okay. Perfect. I'm excited. They all sound really good. I tried to do a little bit of a deep dive on all of your books beforehand and get a good idea for how you write, and you exclusively write thrillers. Have you thought about writing outside of the thriller genre?
Probably not at this point. I mean, I did have that little foray into the dystopian world with my first books, but I
Yep.
think this is my sweet spot. This is home for
Mhm.
me,
Yep.
especially given my day job, and I just have so much material
Oh, yeah.
for thrillers, and I love to read thrillers. That's
Mhm.
primarily the genre that I read. Although I do like to throw in a good like contemporary romance here and there
Mhm. A
to
palate
mix it
cleanser.
up. Yeah, exactly,
It's like after
exactly.
3 thrillers, you just need something easy.
You do. You need something easy and light, and fun. So yeah, I think thrillers are probably where I'm gonna stay for now
Awesome, awesome. Well,
until I run out of ideas.
I with your job, I don't think you will run out of ideas. It sounds like you have got if I were you, I would just be, like, taking notes on the side of everything and getting good ideas from everyone you see. And do any of your, people in your day-to-day work know that you write thrillers?
Yes. So my coworkers, many of them do know.
Uh-huh.
It's not something that I have publicized widely,
Yeah.
but they have found out over the years. And then I have a pen name. I write Ellery Kane is not my real name. I
Oh.
do write under a pen name. Yeah, surprise. Be- because for that very reason. So when
Yep.
I'm interviewing inmates, I don't want them to be able to go and find these books that I've read that are very adjacent and inspired by some of their
Okay.
circumstances, and they definitely take a position on things that would be probably interesting to some of the inmates. Parole, which is kind of the area that I work in, it does tend to be pretty political, and
Yeah.
people's beliefs about parole. And so I didn't ever want my thoughts as an author, and opinions as an author to interfere with my work with inmates, and I wouldn't want them to think I'm biased in some way,
Yeah.
based on the characters that I write. So
Wow. Wow, that is so interesting, and that's so good to know. And I'm sorry, I didn't know you wrote under a pen name, but I guess that's part of it.
that's my secret. That's my
Yep.
twist.
That's our secret. Ellery, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today and give me a little more behind the scenes of not just you, but also The Wrong Family, which is one of my new favorite thrillers. I am so excited to read more of your books. And yeah, thank you so much. This meant so much to me that you took the time to come and talk about your books and yourself.
I really appreciate you having me. And as you read through some of my other books, I would love to hear what you think about them.
Oh, I can't wait. Maybe we can do this again after I read a couple more. I would
I
love
would
that.
love that. Same.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ellery, and I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.